Hi, and welcome to Take Every Thought Captive, our weekly look at the Catholic intellectual tradition and an exploration of the authors, books, and topics that have shaped Catholic thinking for 2,000 years. My name is Jason Gale, and I'm joined this week by Dr. Benjamin Smith, our lecturer in philosophy here at Catholic Studies Academy. And today, before we get started, I want to invite all our listeners, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Please share this content with all your friends and family. And as you'll see today, what we want to look at is, why is philosophy necessary? We want to look at kind of the necessity of it. Many times, when we think about the necessities of life, we think about food, clothing, shelter, money, things like that, things that make the externals of life and even the interior life possible, right? But one of the things that is so important that we also have to look at are, what are the necessities of the spiritual life? What are the necessities of the interior life of man? And particularly the question we want to look at and answer today is, why is it necessary, especially and this is true for all human persons, why is it necessary to pursue wisdom? This is what we want to cover, and it's something that I think is becoming I think even more imperative today, because there's a lot of issues that divide us, and we have to be able to speak clearly about them. Mm-hmm. We have to be able to speak intelligently about them. And I think we also have to, it really forms the basis of civil dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we suffer from now, is just we don't have the ability to talk to the other person, because it always, quickly goes to ad hominem attacks, or, we quickly put everything into binary choices, right? You either hate grandma or whatever the other option is. Like there's, or you're Hitler or you're this other option. Like no, we have to think better about these things, and that's one of our primary goals here at Catholic Studies Academy, is to help us think better and more deeply about all sorts of issues. But we have to have those tools to do that. And so today, Dr. Smith is going to take us through kind of the necessity of philosophy for life. So, Dr. Smith, kick us off here. Where do we even begin with a topic as big as this?
Well, thank you, Jason. It's always good to begin with, one of our sort of wise guides, right? One of our one of the people who can sort of point us in the right direction. And so I think it's always nice to begin with Socrates when you can. And here with the topic of why philosophy, right, is necessary for life, Socrates is very helpful. Socrates it wasn't the first Western philosopher, but he's generally recognized as being, sort of maybe the most important to really inaugurate the philosophical tradition that we have. Yeah. And, he was a man of the city. He wasn't actually the sage on the hill. He was very deeply involved in Athenian life. In fact, we know that he was a decorated war hero, actually, for the Athenian side in the war with Sparta. And as big as Athens was, in classical Greece, it wasn't so big that they didn't know. People knew who Socrates was, right? Yeah. He had a reputation, and for all sorts of reasons, good and bad, depending on who you were. But one of the things he emphasized in his teaching over and over again, and I remember this is one of those things that just stuck with me when I first encountered philosophy as an undergraduate, was the claim that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Yeah, that's
good.
That
again. Yeah, it's a classic maxim. The unexamined life is not worth living. That's meant to be sort of
provocative, right?
Yeah, a little provocative. Yeah, it's meant to needle you, right? And actually, that's a lot of what Socrates did. In his own work, he would needle. Sort of he moved. Oddly enough, he wasn't an aristocrat himself, but he moved often among the upper echelons of Athenian society, and was very often, with either kind of men who were in their middle age and kind of successful, or very bold and confident youth, young men, right? He would interact with those two groups, and show them very often that their lives and their thoughts about their lives were not as sharp and clear as they thought they were, right? So very often, he's really focused in on life, right? In terms of how we live and why we should live certain ways and why we should not. And he says very clearly, he says, I can't think of nothing better for myself or for the city than to always be asking what is the best sort of life and how we can be the best sort of men, and pressing, right, these either aspiring youth, right, young men, or these successful men to examine themselves and examine their lives and examine their ideas about what does it mean to be a good man, a better man? What does it mean to live well, right? And pressing them on those points.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I remember when first, being introduced to Socrates and a lot of the ancients and stuff, that, you have this idea of philosophy in your head, that it's just a bunch of dudes in like ivory towers with pipes and like, wonderful bourbon and things like that. Just
there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, I mean, no offense, but just like conjuring up ideas for the sake of conjuring up ideas, whereas, but the ancients, they were deep thinkers, and but philosophy was very much connected to the practical. It was very much connected to real life. It wasn't just looking at Marx's philosophy of nature or something like that. It wasn't really trying to like dive at things that were seeming that way. It was very practical. It was, how can I, like you said, how can I be a better person? What is goodness? What is truth? What is being? Looking at all these different things. So, I mean, it's super practical with regards to why we need to examine our lives. So, I mean, when we think about it, don't think about it as just, it's just, sitting around thinking about things. No. It's very practical. It has deep effects in your life.
Yeah, I think that you're right, Jason. I think that maxim, the unexamined life, right? I mean, he's telling you there, he's putting a fine point on it, right? He's saying, look, you need to examine your life. You need to not live a life that's unexamined, right? Rather, you need to live an examined life. Now, I think for Socrates, that doesn't mean, trying to find your inner self or something like that. Right?
Yeah, we've talked about that.
That's right. Yeah. But it does mean reflecting on your life and the principles and ideas that guide your life. And I think that is, I think Socrates is right, that is a real necessity for a human being, for a man, for a variety of reasons, but mainly most fundamentally because of human nature itself, right?
Yeah.
That is, we're not badgers or birch trees, right? We are human beings. We're rational animals, right? And as such, right, we exist in a way that demands examination, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to be true to ourselves and true to our own nature. Aristotle has another great line. It's at the very beginning of the Metaphysics. Students of Aristotle, I'm sure will remember this. That all men by nature desire to understand or desire to know. Yeah. We just are the kinds of things that make up ideas and definitions and form judgments, right? Whether we like it or not. It's interesting, we do have opinions, right? Just go to Facebook if you disbelieve me, right? Or don't go to Facebook, but whatever.
Yeah.
We have opinions and we have questions that force themselves upon us on a regular basis, especially given, all the knowledge we have from sort of news media, or all the things that, are brought to our attention by the news media. The way I like to put it to my students is that, one way to think about this is just to recognize that life is full of questions, right? It's full of questions and full of choices. And we all know that, right? It only takes a minute to step back and say, yeah, it is. I mean, just think about everything right in front of us, right? Will you get the vaccine or will you not get the vaccine? Will you, I just struck me that if anybody listens to this 5 years from now, they may not remember what I'm talking about. Anyways, will you get the vaccine? Will you not? Will you wear a mask? Will you not? What should we do about the withdrawal of troops in Afghanistan? As if that mattered to my day-to-day life, but nevertheless, like things like that. And then, what kind of job should I pursue? Should I report this unethical procedure that I think is going on at a certain institution? Maybe all the every day, right? Who should you date? Should you get married? Should you stay married? Questions arise before us, right? And choices arise before us. I mean, that's a fair assessment, isn't it, Jason?
Yeah, and the big thing is that a lot of the questions that are put before us are not, 2 + 2 is 4. They're more along the lines of like calculus. So I mean, you got to have some prerequisites to be able to confidently and rightly find the right answer in these situations. You can't simply go, I mean, if my wife and I, if we lived our marriage based on our feelings, well, that would be a horrible marriage, and it probably wouldn't last very long if we just went off of our feelings. Okay, so that's going to be our guide. No, like we have to have, there has to be, certain principles established, and this is why, in the Church of Sacramental Order and everything, we have the questions of intent. There's, all these things that need to be present for the sacrament to take place. But I mean, like those things have to be established. You can't simply just go into and looking at these things. Otherwise, you're going to make bad decisions.
That's right.
That's just it. And the other thing with that is, you could probably like skate through parts of your life.
Oh, sure.
Without having to
think very deeply.
To deal with these things. But we usually call that like adolescence. Right. But once you become an adult and things, like there's going to be questions that you're going to have to deal with, that it's not going to be a simple answer. You're going to deal with them over time, and you're going to think about them over time.
Right. And
they're going to be more important than other questions.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, that's the other thing that I think people need to really take to heart, that they're some questions are more important than others.
That's right. Yeah.
And we have to put them in the right order. We have to, address them in a realistic, sober way.
Right. I mean, so you can say like life is full of questions, right? But then amongst those, some maybe are more trivial than others, right?
Yeah.
Exactly what shirt you're going to wear or something like that. I mean, obviously that's not a super important, but there are super important questions, right? As you said, some questions matter more than others. These are the kinds of questions that traditionally have been called ultimate questions, right?
Yeah.
Within the literature. And some people don't like that phrase, but I think it's so useful, actually.
Yeah.
The ultimate questions, sometimes called the perennial questions, they are the kinds of questions that shape one's life, right?
Yeah.
The kinds of questions that shape a culture, that create a whole country and its whole sort of trajectory, right? Is man morally depraved or not, right? By his birth? That's a question that shapes your whole worldview, right?
Sure.
If you're a Christian, you believe that man is corrupt, right? I mean, it's a fundamental Christian position, right? That we think that human nature is corrupted, right? It's not entirely destroyed, but it's bent, right? It's messed up, right? And that's that's something that distinguishes us from other religions, right?
Yeah, or even just secular culture, which simply says, well, everybody's basically good.
That's right.
You hear that all the time. Okay, so I mean, that's a big fundamental distinction between two views. So I mean, how do you so you have those people that say, well, okay, man is basically good. Okay, how are we going to talk to this person to show them that that's not the case? That's right. And this is again, like what you're saying, those ultimate questions. That's okay, right. So as they say, man is fundamentally good. Okay, what is good? Right. And this is and like you said, this is what Socrates did.
That's right. Yeah.
He would needle them and he would poke them.
And for those, that's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead.
And for those listening, we're in the middle of the cancel culture. Go back and read The Death of Socrates.
Mm.
He was like probably the first one that was ultimately canceled because they didn't like what he was saying, and so they just killed him.
That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah, he challenged their ideas about justice, and justice is one of those things, right? That's an ultimate question. I mean, right now, so with their own political debates and so forth going on,
sure,
in the background, this is the thing that both as a philosopher is both highly annoying, but also confirms the thesis or the premise, anyways, over and over again, right? Is you see all these angry debates about what should or should not be the case, whether it be with respect to race, gender, or what's going on in Afghanistan, etc. But so rarely do we back up and ask, what do you mean by should? What do you mean by, like, why is this the good thing to do? Why is this just? What is justice? Why should we be just? There's a whole book written on that. It's called The Republic, right? and it's an amazing text. Those are ultimate questions, right? In the sense that the way you answer those questions determines how you answer other questions, right?
Yeah.
So if you say you decide to live your life according to pleasure, what's good is for me to enjoy myself. Well, that's going to answer other questions, like you were talking about marriage earlier. Well, when my marriage is no longer pleasant, when it becomes too unpleasant, then I'll just end it, and maybe when my life becomes too unpleasant, I'll just end it. Right. That sort of thing. Right. That's good. Your answer about something like, say, what is the good? Right.
Yeah.
Or what's the ultimate criteria for truth, or things like that. That's going to determine the way you answer other questions and make other choices. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
If you affirm, right, the existence of God, affirm the immortality of the soul, that's going to affect the way you think and live, the way you regard all sorts of other questions and relationships and decisions. Whether or not you're going to have coffee this morning, or you're going to, choose vanilla ice cream. That's not, that's not life shaping or culture forming, right? Whereas your decisions about the soul and God and justice, those are life shaping and culture forming.
Yeah, and I think one of the sad things is many times we quickly get to the philosophy is about practical life and real life and things like that. Many times when we're thinking about these things, we immediately go to this example of applying justice, whereas we need to step back and answer those questions. What is justice?
That's right.
What is the good? How do I even determine what is good?
That's right.
Because and many times we like to, our secular society likes to either oversimplify things or simply just put things on a platitude, whereas no, it's important for us, to make distinctions. It's important for us to examine the thing that's before us, so that we make the right decision. The example I always use with my high school kids is, when we talk about, love, or we talk about things like that. Well, I love chocolate, and I love my dog, and the limitations of the love are based upon the object of love, right? So it would be wrong for me to share my love of chocolate with my dog, right? But because why? Because of the nature of a dog, right? I have to understand this. So I mean, we have to be able to examine, even if it's like a silly example like that. It's important for us to go through those mental exercises to find those distinctions, so that we can speak correctly, so that we can act correctly, and like you said, really begin to form those solid positions that those are going to be the principles that we stand on. We're going to be just because we understand what justice is. The other thing that does is it doesn't make every moral decision a pickup game of basketball,
right?
Where you just have to start over with every example and every encounter
Sure.
of that, which I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, that's how they operate. And that's why
Mhm.
many times the default position is your feelings.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. They haven't thought it through, right? So they don't have
right.
a stable sort of judgment about what's good or what is just, right? And really, that's it's important to have that because it affects your life, right?
Yeah.
The way you think, the way you think about justice, the way you think about the good, affects your life. That's true of all of these ultimate questions, right? And over the over the centuries, philosophers, I think, have done a good job, more or less, of recognizing that these ultimate questions, really almost any question, but all these ultimate questions kind of resolve themselves into kind of three groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I think, a good way to approach and think about it for yourself, right? When you're
Sure.
thinking, when you're examining yourself, right? Is that the ultimate questions can be divided into questions about goodness, questions about reality, and questions about truth, right?
Yeah.
So you could say, the good, being, and truth, right? That those are the three ultimate, like, sort of categories, right?
Sure.
And if somebody was to dispute me and say, "Oh, that's not true," well, and they would give me an argument, well, they would actually just be feeding into my thesis, right? Because they would be arguing about what's true. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying, right? So and talking about what's real, right? So really, these are inescapable, just because of the way the human nature, again, is set up, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting when you see this, that really any attempt to refute the thesis actually ends up proving the thesis. And that shows you really something, I think, about the way human beings, almost as a structure, like our mechanism, right, is set up to go towards truth and thinking and that sort of thing, albeit we're corrupt, right?
Yeah.
We're fallen, but nevertheless, it's kind of like we were a finely crafted machine, right, that has fallen into disrepair and so forth. But still, the machine is good, right? It's towards truth, right? But in any event, I think that's that premise is just correct, right? That ultimate questions resolve into questions about goodness, reality, and truth. And this happens anytime you evoke the claim that something should or should not be done, right? So I want to make that very clear to our audience.
Yep.
If you say this should be done, this should not be done, you are talking about the good, right? You're making a claim about what's desirable to be done, what's desirable not to be done, right? Or what should not be done, or what's undesirable, right? Everything from, we should feed the starving kids in Africa, to you shouldn't get a divorce, to you should take better care of yourself, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
All of those things, right, are judgments about the good. They presuppose, right, an understanding of what is the good. And again, this Socrates is so good at this, right? He, people will say, well, you should do this, you should do that, right? In the dialogues, and he'll say, oh, I'm so blessed to be in the presence of someone who must have the knowledge of the good, right? Because how could you form a judgment about what should or should not be done unless you already know the good? You must be very wise, right? Of course, then Socrates.
Oh, no wonder this guy was killed. No wonder he was killed.
And then Socrates proceeds to show that they actually don't know what they're doing, but logically, he's right.
Yeah.
If you make a judgment that our current immigration policies are good, or that our current immigration policies are bad, right? Regardless of which side you're on, you are presupposing an idea about the good, right?
Yeah.
Presupposing that right, the good. And that, really goes across the board, whether we're talking about, marriage, friendship, vocation, political affiliation, religious commitments, all those sorts of things, right? All of those presuppose, right, a standard of the good. I should commit my life to Jesus, right? And that kind of thing. Or I should become an accountant. Well, those are obviously at different levels, right, in terms of their importance. But they both presuppose an idea of the good, right? So, a good exercise here, an effective exercise, is to think, whenever you're dealing with something like this, is to ask, why is this desirable to be done, right? That gets at the question of the good, right? Again, sometimes our choices are going to be, not less important than others. But your religious commitments, your vocation, your political affiliation, the kinds of people you decide to be friends with, right? All of those are, are sort of life shaping and culture forming, and presuppose, right, a notion of the good. Often, though, those ideas about the good really back up into what we think about reality, right? I actually really kind of like the atheist little motto or slogan you see, some advertisement: "This is the only life you get, enjoy it." And I'm kind of like, have you ever seen that? Like some version of that? I kind of like it, because I'm sort of like, from their point of view, that kind of makes some sense, like, I mean, if I don't share their worldview, I think that they're wrong, that this isn't the only life we get. I think there's a particular judgment and a second judgment, right? And we have immortal life, for good or ill. So I think they're fundamentally wrong, because I think they're wrong about the nature of reality, right? But if I shared their view of reality, I might, maybe not, but I might sort of be an Epicurean. I might say, hey, let's have a good time, because this is it. Maybe I'd be a moderate Epicurean, because I don't want to cause myself too much pain, right? But you might be a moderate Epicurean because this is all there is, or something like that. But really, it's important, right? If you think that that there is no God, that there is no soul, that's going to impact your view of the good, right? If you do think there's a God, right, then it might even make sense for you to be a martyr. I mean, you think about the martyrdoms, right, in the ancient church. In some ways, either they're absurd or heroic.
There's no middle ground there.
I mean, either it's because really you want to say, look, just burn the incense to the emperor and go and get on with your life. What does it matter?
You don't have to mean it. You
don't have to mean it. You can just, I mean, you're gonna go get tortured, right, or eaten by lions because you won't burn a little incense. Right? I mean, it seems foolish unless God is real.
And
that goes to really then your worldview, right? Your view of reality itself, right? If you want to kind of step away from that perspective, and just ask the question: do you think that purpose and meaning are real? Right, that they're in reality? Well, that's going to fundamentally shape what you think. Like, we are in a society now where we don't think of meaning and purpose as embedded within reality.
Right?
We're idealist, right, in that sense, right? We think of meaning and purpose as something up here, something we create with the mind, right? That means, right, that we can define ourselves as whatever the heck we want, right? We can call whatever we want. We can say,
you just made yourself God. That's right. Essentially what you did.
That's right. So you're gonna have a fundamentally different view about what you should do. If you think that there is an objective purpose in reality, then you're gonna say, oh, I need to conform to that purpose. Right. There's a path for me laid out, and I need to cultivate myself in a way that allows me to follow that purpose.
A great
fundamental difference.
A great example of this is a couple of years ago, the UK established a ministry of loneliness. And you can go look it up. It's absolutely fascinating. And they established this new ministry of loneliness because they said that they had some polls, and they were looking at some mental health data and all these things. They were saying that there was a poll that was like 9 out of 10 Britons don't think that there's any ultimate purpose or meaning to life.
Right.
9 out of 10, and it was it was like below the age of 20 to 40 or something like that.
It's terrible.
So you're talking, like, here you have a significant group of the population that has a view of reality that is fundamentally flawed, right? And it's causing huge problems,
right?
And to the point where they have to establish an entire ministry dedicated to helping these folks find meaning and find purpose and all of these things. And again, a lot of that goes back to, like you said, there's a design there.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe what they should do is put some philosophy in their curriculum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and devastating. And I'm sure the situation is maybe not quite as extreme in the U.S., but probably close. In terms of that idea, like there's no purpose or meaning to life, right? I mean, our ancestors never thought that. Most of them never thought that way. That's one of the key distinctions, I think, between contemporary culture and ancient cultures. And this is true transculturally, right? If you're talking about, say, China or India or places like that, Japan, they, in their ancient societies, had the idea that there's an objective meaning and purpose, right?
Yeah.
And certainly in Western civilization, whether Christian or pre-Christian, right? They still would have thought there's some, meaning and purpose embedded within reality, right? And to say that that's one of those things, right? That's an ultimate question. See, that's a question about reality and being, and the way you answer that question has an enormous impact on the way you see the world, of course, but also on your understanding of what's good, right?
Right.
And then logically, I'll just touch on this quickly because I know we've got a lot to cover, but logically, the next set of questions, the next ultimate question that opens up is the question of truth, right? You can say, okay, well, I've got the good figured out because the good, or at least some of the good, some of it figured out because of the way it relates to my view of reality. But then there's the question of, well, how do you know your view of reality is true? Right.
Yeah.
Like, and that really pushes you into what in philosophy we call, the criteria problem or the standard problem. Like, what is your criteria of truth? What is the method by which you come to know the answer to these questions?
Yeah.
Where does experience fit in there? Where does reason? Where does science? What about religion? All of that, plays into that question. Now, I think interestingly, all three of these questions are interconnected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Even when we look at, the definition of truth, truth is that which is in accord with reality, right?
Right.
So if you want to know what's true, you have to understand what reality is.
That's right.
And then you can make statements about it and you make propositions and things like that.
That's right.
Reality is the judgment. Reality is the standard of truth.
Yeah. So, right. And then out of that, you can develop a notion of what's good, right? And how you should live, right? So in those three ultimate questions in the study of philosophy, broadly speaking, are gathered under three headings, right? That's ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology, right? Ethics, studies the good. Metaphysics studies your view of reality, and epistemology, sorry for the gigantic word, but epistemology studies your view about knowledge and truth, right? So sorry for the big phrase, big words here, right? The technical language, but those are the categories it goes under, right? And that pushes you towards, recognizing the reality and importance of ultimate questions, right?
Yeah,
is what really pushes you towards recognizing that you really must become a philosopher, right? At least in the ancient sense. By saying that, I don't mean that you need to get a PhD in philosophy. In fact, I would discourage you from doing that. Okay. What I do mean is what the ancients meant by it, and what the term literally means, and that is you should become a lover of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people ask you, like, well, why should I study philosophy? You're like, well, do you want to be a fool? Right? Do you want to be wise? Right? I mean, at some point you say, look, this is about wisdom. Of course you should pursue it. And I think that's, in its most basic, fundamental sense, all of us should be lovers of wisdom. We should pursue wisdom, pursue philosophy, right?
And it's meant for everybody. I mean, look at all of popular movie culture within the past 20 years. There's so many shows that have the wise janitor, right? That helps everybody out, right? The wisdom is for everybody. Doesn't matter what you do. Wisdom's for everybody, and everybody's called because of our nature, because of the way we are. We're called to think. We're
That's
called
right.
to desire to know the truth, to understand reality, and to cooperate with it, right?
Right. Sure. I mean, we may have maybe different capacities and different opportunities,
Sure.
right? But you know, if you're you know, an accountant and a father, or a mechanic and a father, and you know, all that, you don't have maybe as much time, you know, as a philosophy professor, right, to spend reading the Republic, but you should still be a lover of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
That is, you should pursue wisdom as much as, again, your circumstances and capacity allow. Um, I think, you know, you think about the opposite. Well, if you're not going to pursue wisdom, you're gonna hate wisdom. You're going to be ignorant of wisdom. You're going to be someone who is foolish. You know, the Bible holds out to us, right? This tension between the fool and the wise man, right?
Right. Folly.
And,
Yeah.
and it's really, you know, it's really key, right? Either you're somebody who loves wisdom, or you're not. There's a lot of different things, of course, what you could say about wisdom, but I think for our purposes, it's sufficient to say that wisdom is the habit of forming sound, rational judgments about the ultimate questions, right?
Yeah.
The man who is wise, and this is what Socrates is holding out to us, you know, and certainly the Stoics would have held out, is the wise man is the person who has judged well,
Yeah.
rigorously, thoughtfully, right, about the good and about reality and about truth, right? They haven't done it in a sloppy way. They haven't, but they've done it in a way that's examined, right? Going back to where we began with the examined life, they've looked at the ultimate questions. They've considered them seriously. They've drawn on the best resources and formed rational judgments about those ultimate questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know this from experience too. I mean, this is something that can easily be tested in the laboratory of life, right?
Right.
Like, you know, how many we've all made, you know, rash decisions. And upon 2 seconds of reflection, we're like,
That's
crap,
right.
I should have done something else.
That's right.
Like we understand that the things we do, they require this examination. The difficult part though is to have the discipline, to have the kind of the foresight to say, I need to think about these questions beforehand. And this is what I want to encourage all our listeners. If you're not there yet, if you are, I think you are, because you're listening to this. But to have that discipline to say, it's good. It's one of the things that's good is for me to have opinions about what is good, what is true, what is reality. It's good for me to seek to find answers to those ultimate questions, because like you said, these questions are unavoidable.
That's true.
That's
key. Yeah.
They form so much of how you're going to live your life and how you are going to make further decisions.
Absolutely.
That it's absolutely imperative that we have some sort of even if it's basic, right? Just some sort of answer to these ultimate questions.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, you know, you really almost, Jason, can't press the point about unavoidability enough, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, one reaction to this is like, look, man, I don't have time for this. I got some bills to pay. You know, the wife, I got to go to the stupid birthday party for this, you know, kid or whatever. You know, it's like, I just don't have time for this, right?
Yeah.
This is not actually what's important, right? And I think what you want to say in response to that, right, is that you're saying, I don't have time for this, means that you think that those things that exclude your time for it are more important.
Yeah.
Which implies a judgment about the good, right? See what I'm saying? Right. Like, you know, I always think it's so funny when people say, oh, I can't go to church. Right. You know, I just can't get there. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, if you're a Catholic and go to mass, it's like what, 55 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, I just can't work in those 55 minutes on Sunday. And like, and the same person spends like 4 hours in the gym.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Like
6 days a week. Yeah.
Yeah. Your life is telling me
what
you think is important.
Yeah.
Right. Your life is telling me what you think is the good. And that's the key you cannot get away from. You
Yeah.
cannot get away from the fact that your decisions, your beliefs, your relationships all presuppose or imply a judgment about the good.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's just, you just can't avoid that. And similarly with all of your beliefs, right? They're all going to end up resolving into something that is related to the good, to your view of reality, or to your understanding of the truth, right? If your response is, well, Dr. Smith, that's a bunch of crap. Well, you're telling you're that judgment presupposes, I'm like, oh, okay, good. By crap, I take it you mean false. All right, great. So if you know that my claim here is false, then you must know what is true.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You must have some understanding of the truth, right? So you see,
please share it with me.
That's right. You just can't get away from this, right?
Yeah.
Even if you roll your eyes and say, this is silly, I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Even if you say something like, well, science has answered all these questions. Well, that's just, you don't know anything much if you think that, okay? I'm sorry. Science is a very good method for answering certain kinds of questions, right?
Right.
And within that domain, it should be pursued and valued. But science cannot answer questions about the ethical, for example, right?
Right.
You hear
or the nature of love, or
the nature of love.
I mean,
you hear to no end, this follow the science, right? And leaving aside the particular context in which that emerges, you can't follow the science because the science doesn't tell you where to go, right? Like judgments about what should or should not be done are ethical judgments. They have to do with value. They have to do with notions of the good and the desirable. Science can tell you if you engage in this behavior, right, then here is a likely outcome, right? But that you should avoid that outcome is a judgment about the good, right?
Right.
Science has no way of picking up on that.
Yeah.
Similarly, science presupposes a world that's rational, that's consistent, in which sensations tell you something about reality, right? All that sort of thing, a quantifiable world. Well, all of
it's
that,
knowable.
Right?
The fact that it's even knowable.
Yeah, that's right. That's intelligible. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's not to say anything. That's not in any way to criticize science. It's just to say, look, it's limited. And it presupposes certain things such that it can't be the final investigator, right, of these questions. It doesn't ultimately resolve these questions. It can resolve some questions, but not the ultimate questions, right? And so,
and I think that's the key point there, is that science cannot answer the ultimate questions.
That's right. That's right.
The ones that are necessary for your interior life. And I think even to go back to even the maxim from Socrates, right? The unexamined life is not worth living. Even when you look at spiritual practices within religious orders, almost all religious orders have daily examination of conscience.
Sure. Yeah.
They understand the value of that examination. And it's not this, divine navel gazing where you're just kind of looking within yourself to see how you think you did, but you're taking reality as God has designed it, right? You're taking the 10 commandments, those absolutes. You're taking those, you're taking the 10 commandments, the Beatitudes, all these things, and you're judging your life according to that reality.
Right.
It's not this, divine navel gazing. So, I mean, even within, our Catholic faith, there's this maxim is built into the spiritual life, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a great example, Jason. I totally agree. And it's a good it's a good indication, right, of the gravity, right, of the situation, I think. One other thing, and this is sort of indicated a little bit by the allegory of the cave, one of the reason to kind of think about the importance of this examination, which, as you say, religious orders carry out, is to think about the fact that you're going to make your decisions are going to reveal a judgment about the good, right?
Yeah.
and likely are going to disclose judgments about being and about the truth. But if you haven't done that work yourself, right? That is, if you haven't examined your life, right? Then you could ask yourself, and I think it's a good question, where do my judgments about the good come from? Right? Like if I haven't really spent the work, put in the work to think about the good and what's truly good, or what's my ultimate standard of truth or something like that. Well, where does it come from? Right? Because I've got one. Well, the sad news is it probably comes from what Plato would have called the many, right? That is, it comes from your culture, right? Your society. It comes from Facebook. It comes from TV. It comes from stupid celebrities, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like why should I give any concern about what Sheryl Crow thinks about anything other than music? You know what I mean? Like, but people really do. Like, oh, the celebrities, like they're influenced by, what celebrities think, what Beyonce thinks. Like, who cares, right? But we pick those beliefs up, or from our friends, or from our peers, right? We pick up these beliefs, and in fact, this is even worse than that. There's a whole discipline called marketing, right?
Yeah.
And it's designed to use human psychology, right, to manipulate your psyche, to form certain judgments of, I really should go on that expensive vacation. If I don't, I'm letting my family down. Right? That kind of thing, right? To manipulate your mind to make certain choices that'll, help that business or whatever.
Yeah.
And then of course you could also then take it over into political things or social things, but we're constantly being sold messages, right?
About what is good.
That's
and,
right.
and again, about, so, and while they may be, a couple of degrees down, they do have to do with the big three, the three ultimate kind of categories we were talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, very often they push us in a direction that's materialistic, consumeristic, those sorts of things, right? Or vain, right? All that kind of thing in terms of vanity. So, when you're thinking about all this, here's the thing: is we're all going to form judgments.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to be involved in, dealing with the true, the good. And being, right? If you don't examine that for yourself, you're just going to pick up what your society or some marketing team in some business or some political campaign is selling you. And that means that, like, operating up here in your life, right, is going to be a whole set of ideas that you didn't think of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And are likely false. Right. And you're just being manipulated into following, so that your life almost is not even your own. You're just being kind of drug around by ideas and passions that you've inherited from your broader culture.
So I think a good place for people to start is, to understand that, in examining your life, like Socrates is saying, don't think of this as something as, okay, I have to do all of the work. I have to do this. No. Like anything else, whether you're learning how to work on a car, to woodwork or something like that, you need good guides. Sure. And there's plenty out there. And this is kind of, I think, the first step to moving towards this examined life. Or, I need a guide.
Right.
Who am I going to choose for this? Am I going to choose, like you said, it starts with that basic choice. Am I just going to allow the culture to feed me?
Right.
Because I'm lazy and I really don't want to read or research anything like that, or even listen to podcasts or watch YouTube videos or something.
Right.
Or am I going to be very deliberate in the guides that I choose?
Sure.
So this is, I think, the first point to look into is, who are going to be my guides. And luckily, if you're Catholic, the church is full of saints who draw upon 2,000 years and more, because they even go back to the ancients, Augustine, Aquinas. They all go back to ancient philosophers and stuff. So you have just a plethora of good guides to guide you in leading an examined life.
Right, right,
And
right.
for those that are not Catholic, look at the Catholic Church. We have just tons of holy men and women who understood what was true, good, and beautiful, and sought that above everything else. Above everything else. So that's kind of, I think a good place to begin is,
Sure.
be deliberate in the guides you're going to choose. I'm not saying you have to throw out your TV, but I'm saying, understand what's going on there. Throwing out your TV would not be a bad idea, but just saying, it's not necessary. But all right, Dr. Smith, any final thoughts or comments?
Sure. I think that the alternative, right, to living an examined life, right? I come back to this all the time, because if you're not loving wisdom, then you're not loving wisdom, right? That means you're not on the path. You're not on the path of thinking about what's true and good and real. And that means that your judgments about those things, which do shape your life and form culture, are going to be baseless, groundless, and probably false. And the real tragedy of that at its deepest level is that means that you're going to waste your life, right? Like you've got a life. I mean, kind of go back to that atheist thing. You got one life, right? And I would take the little bit opposite view of them. You got one life. Take it seriously, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy yourself, of course, but take it seriously and don't waste it, right? I mean, what a thing to go through your whole life never really following a sound judgment about what's real, right? Instead, living in a way that's deluded about the truth and about goodness and about reality. And so you end up living, like, Plato depicts in the allegory of the cave, among shadows of reality. You spend your whole time pursuing things that aren't actually worthy of pursuit. You have ideas that are mostly false, right? And you've basically wasted your life and lived like a fool. That's what it means to live like a fool, right? Is to waste your life, to be deluded about what's good. And the Proverbs plays this out so well for us. You see the young man who wastes his resources, his love, his time for relationships, all that, right, on folly, right, on delusion, right. And so I think you really, what's starkly in front of you when you're thinking about philosophy, thinking about the pursuit of wisdom, is this: do I want to waste my life and live in delusion, or do I want to live a life that is meaningful and impactful, and realistic and rational and sane, right? Those are really the options, I think, in front of you. And again, that doesn't mean you need to become an academic philosopher, but that does mean that you need to engage with these questions. You pointed out the idea, and I think it's a very practical and good idea, Jason, is in terms of imitating the saints and looking at those examples. I would also say, we are both blessed and cursed to live in the information age. And so, we're cursed because we get false messages all the time, right? We're just bombarded by lies and delusion. But at the same time, we also have an enormous number of resources, right? So even if you aren't going to become an academic philosopher, well, there's Catholic Studies Academy, right? And, you can study as much philosophy as you would like in our courses. You can listen to this podcast, of course. About half, or maybe even a little more than half of our podcasts are on philosophy. And then there's other great resources. I mean, you just go to YouTube, you can find good, solid lectures on philosophy all day long, right? In addition to that, we got cheap books. There's all sorts of books. I just have just a couple quick one really great one. Joseph Pieper, Leisure is the Basis of Culture. Great book, right? I mean, it tells you a lot about philosophy. Pieper is a great popularizer of philosophy, right? He's easy to read. He's a good writer.
Absolutely.
Sort of thing. There's another great little book I have just sitting right here called The Question of God. And it's about C.S. Lewis and Sigmund Freud debate God, love, sex, and the meaning of life. It's a great book. I've read it several times. It's by Dr. Nicoli. You can find it. There's a ton of books that are available that are like that, right? I always encourage people, if they want to get started, read a little bit of the early dialogues, from Socrates or from Plato, the Euthyphro, the Apology. Those are great. And then also, read Epictetus, right? He has a little thing called the Handbook. It's a great little text that anybody can read. I wouldn't say that I agree with everything Epictetus has to say, but it's good for your mind, right? It's good he'll help you think about these matters, right? And again, Marcus Aurelius would be another one, right?
His meditations,
his meditations are great, for stimulating your thought. So we live in a time where we have the resources available to us to engage in philosophy, or at least to engage in thinking about truth and reality and goodness in a serious way. If you don't, right, then you're likely to waste your life.
All right, Dr. Smith, that's I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about. And I just want to encourage everybody, write that down, put that little maxim somewhere. The unexamined life is not worth living. Or put up, Fulton Sheen's life is worth living, right?
That's right.
But the kind of life we're going to live is going to be based on the way that we understand goodness, reality, and truth. So it's important for us to seek those things and to seek God above all else, forsake everything else for the sake of that. So in the meantime, I want to thank all of our listeners thanks for listening. Check out all of our content over at CatholicStudiesAcademy.com. God bless.